His expression hardened, and he raised his hand slightly as though silencing her. Do not question. The Spirit does not explain itself to children. Obedience is better than sacrifice. Before we dive in, please like and subscribe. Thank you. Betty was 16, tall for her age, with a curious mind and a stubborn streak her mother often called dangerous. She had grown up in a home where church bells rang louder than morning birds, and where prayers were recited the way children in other places recited rhymes. Her mother, a woman of unshaken belief, often said, "If the pastor does not see it, then it is not yet settled." And for her, there was no pastor greater than Pastor John. To her, he was more than a man of God, he was a direct representative of heaven. She would bow her head slightly when she spoke of him, her eyes glowing with a mix of fear and admiration. Betty did not see things that way. She believed God was big enough to hear her own voice. When she prayed, she spoke like a child speaking to her father. She never felt she needed any man to stand between her and heaven. But each time she said this to her mother, it was as if she had poured oil on fire. "Betty, you don't know anything about life," her mother would snap, waving her hands as though shooing away a fly. "You are still a child. When you grow, you will understand. God has representatives, and you must honor them. Pastor John is a gift to us." Betty would lower her head, not because she agreed, but because her mother's voice always rose in ways that left no room for argument. In her heart, she felt something uneasy whenever she saw the women in church rushing to touch Pastor John's robe, or when they almost whispered his name in reverence. She wondered if they remembered that God was the one they claimed to serve. Her mother did not see her doubts as harmless. To her, Betty's refusal to adore the pastor was dangerous rebellion. And soon, that difference in belief would open a door that Betty wished had remained closed forever. The day she finished her final exam was a day of celebration. The whole house smelled of jollof rice, and neighbors trooped in with congratulations. Bright and ambitious, had always dreamed of flying abroad for her studies. She had worked hard, filling forms late into the night, and browsing for scholarship opportunities in the small internet cafe down the street. And now, her chance had finally come, an admission process to study in the UK. Her mother, beaming with pride, clapped her hands. "God has done it again! But we must seal it with prayer." Pauline smiled politely. She knew what was coming. Her mother was a firm believer in spiritual covering. In her words, blessings not sealed could be stolen. And in this case, she had only one thought in mind. Pastor Amos, known widely as Daddy See-It-All. Betty, who sat quietly in the corner, felt her stomach knot. She knew what her mother meant. She would want them to visit the church. Pastor Amos was famous in the town for his loud prayers, his booming voice that filled the whole hall without a microphone, and his so-called ability to see beyond the natural. Women flocked around him, hanging on his every word, believing he carried the keys to their lives. "I will take both of you to him," their mother declared, clapping her hands as if that sealed the matter. "Once he prays, the visa will come like water." "But Mama," Betty began softly, "can't we just pray here? God hears us. He doesn't need Pastor Amos to tell him what we want." The words had barely left her lips when her mother turned sharply. "Keep quiet, Betty. Do not bring your stubbornness here. You think you know more than your mother? You think you know more than the man of God?" Betty lowered her gaze, her cheeks burning. She did not want to argue, but the heaviness in her chest told her this path was leading them somewhere dangerous. She just didn't know how soon. On Sunday, their mother dressed them both in matching Ankara gowns, her mother insisting she was still a child. The walk to the church was lively, with music from vendors and children running with balloons. But for Betty, each step felt like she was walking into a trap. The church was already full when they arrived. Women swayed in colourful wrappers, singing praises, their voices rising with the drums. The men clapped, their eyes fixed on the altar where Pastor Amos sat like a king, his white agbada flowing around him. When he finally stood, silence swept through the hall. His voice carried authority, And when he said, "God is here," the congregation erupted with shouts of, "Amen." Their mother pushed them to the front after service. She bowed low, her voice trembling with excitement as she spoke. "Daddy, see it all. My daughter Pauline has finished her exam. She has applied for scholarship abroad. We want you to pray for her, so the way will open quickly. It's side and pays and tan." Pastor Amos smiled, his eyes scanning them. He placed his large hand on Ped, muttered words in a low tone, and then lifted his face. "It is done," he said with confidence. "But she must return for private prayers. There are deeper battles to fight. She must not miss it." Betty's heart skipped. She did not like the way his eyes lingered, nor the way her mother's face glowed as though heaven had spoken. "But Pastor..." Betty tried to speak, but her mother silenced her with a sharp pinch. "Thank you, Daddy. We will come back," her mother said quickly, dragging them away before Betty could say another word. Betty clenched her fists as they left. She did not want to return, but she already knew her mother would insist. That night, Betty could not sleep. The words of Pastor Amos echoed in her mind. She must return for private prayers. Something about it felt wrong, like a shadow creeping at the edge of light. She turned on her bed, whispering her own prayer under her breath. "God, please keep me safe. Please help me." Morning came, and as expected, her mother was already making plans. She bustled around the kitchen, humming songs of victory. "Betty, dress up. We are going again. Pauline must not miss this chance." "Mama, I don't want to go," Betty said, her voice trembling but firm. "I don't feel right about it." Her mother stopped, her eyes narrowing. "Are you possessed? What do you mean you don't want to go? Do you want your sister to fail? Do you want to bring shame to this house?" Tears welled in Betty's eyes, but she shook her head. I just believe God hears us already. We don't need him." Her mother dropped the spoon she was holding and placed her hands on her waist. "You are too stubborn, Betty. You will follow me, and that is final. Whether you like it or not, we are going." True to her words, she dragged Betty along once again. The church looked different this time, quieter, darker. Only a few people lingered at the corners, whispering. The air felt heavy. When Pastor Amos saw them, he smiled in a way that made Betty's skin crawl. He welcomed them in and closed the door behind them. And that was the beginning of Betty's nightmare. Daddy See-It-All sat behind his heavy mahogany desk, his eyes sharp and observant. The office was dimly lit, the air thick with the smell of incense and old books. Betty followed her mother into the room, reluctantly, her heart racing faster with every step. She felt as though invisible hands were pressing down on her chest. Her mother, in her usual excitement, rushed forward before Betty could say a word. "Daddy, I brought my daughters, just as I promised. Pauline must get her admission. You know she's a bright child. We need your prayers, Daddy. We cannot do it without you." Pastor Amos nodded slowly, his face expressionless, as if he was studying every detail of. Then, with a sudden burst of energy, he stood up, lifting his hands in dramatic fashion. He began to pray in loud tones, words rolling off his tongue like thunder. Betty closed her eyes, whispering her own prayer in silence. But even as the pastor's voice filled the room, something in her spirit felt uneasy. It was not the prayer itself, it was the man. His voice carried weight, but not peace. She shifted in her chair, trying to shake off the strange feeling creeping over her. When he finally stopped, he lowered his hands and fixed his gaze on Betty's mother. "There are prayers that work," he said gravely. "And then there are prayers that work faster. To get what you desire quickly, you must be ready to obey divine instructions." Her mother's face brightened immediately. "Anything you say, Daddy. We are ready. Tell us what to do." He leaned back in his chair, his eyes flickering between Betty and her mother. Then, slowly, he spoke. "From tomorrow, let the younger one come alone. There are certain prayers that cannot be done in the presence of others. She must return by herself." Betty's eyes widened, and she turned sharply toward her mother, shaking her head. "No, Mama. I don't want to come back. I don't feel comfortable here." Her mother scowled and pressed her hand firmly on Betty's shoulder. "Keep quiet, child. Do you know more than the man of God? If he says you must come, then you will come. Stop bringing shame with your stubbornness." Pastor Amos smiled faintly, watching the exchange without a word. He then stood, stretched his arms wide, and said, "Go in peace. The Spirit will reveal more tomorrow." As they walked home, Betty's stomach churned with dread. She tried to explain again, whispering to her mother as they walked. "Mama, I don't trust him. I don't want to go back there." But her mother brushed her off, almost irritated. "You are a child. You don't know the things of the Spirit. Tomorrow you will go, and you will thank me when you see the result." Betty went to bed with tears soaking her pillow, praying silently in her own words. "God, if you hear me, please don't let anything bad happen to me. Please, protect me." The next day, the air felt heavy around her as she prepared to leave. Her mother stood at the door, urging her on. "Don't waste time. The man of God is waiting. Do as he says, and your sister's breakthrough will come." Reluctantly, Betty made her way to the church compound. The building stood tall, its white walls gleaming in the sun, but to her it felt more like a prison. She walked slowly, each step heavier than the last. When she reached his office, Pastor Amos was already seated, his agbada spread across the chair like a king on his throne. He smiled as she entered, but the smile did not reach his eyes. "Sit down, Betty," he said calmly. His voice was softer than before, almost soothing. "There are ways things work in the spirit realm. You are young, you may not understand now, but later you will see." Betty frowned, confusion clouding her face. "What do you mean, sir? What kind of ways?" His expression hardened, and he raised his hand slightly as though silencing her. "Do not question. The Spirit does not explain itself to children. Obedience is better than sacrifice." Betty sat back uneasily, her hands gripping the edge of the chair. Her heart pounded as she whispered another quick prayer in her mind. Then, without warning, he leaned forward and planted a kiss on her cheek. Betty froze, shock rippling through her body. She jumped to her feet immediately, her chair scraping loudly against the floor. Her eyes widened with fear and disgust. What are you doing?" she stammered. Pastor Amos's expression turned cold, his voice dropping low and heavy. "Sit down, child. No one will believe you if you decide to talk. Do you hear me? Not even your own mother. You will only bring shame to yourself." Betty's legs trembled as she backed away, but he rose swiftly, closing the distance. His large hand gripped her arm tightly, pulling her toward him. She struggled, shaking her head violently. "Let me go. Leave me alone." But he was stronger. His grip tightened as he forced her down, his cold words slicing through her protests. "This is how the Spirit works. Don't fight it. If you resist, you will destroy your family's blessing." Betty's cries were muffled by his heavy hand. She fought with all the strength in her, but his weight pressed her down, crushing her will. Her mind screamed for help, but her voice was swallowed by the silence of the room. When it was over, she lay trembling on the floor, tears streaming down her face, her body aching with shame and pain. He straightened his agbada calmly, as if nothing had happened. Then he leaned close, his eyes burning into hers. "If you speak of this to anyone," he hissed, "your tongue will rot, your womb will dry up, and you will carry a curse that no prayer can break." Betty sobbed quietly, curling into herself as his words sank deep into her heart like poisoned arrows. He opened the door slowly, the bright sunlight spilling into the room. Turning back, he said with a chilling finality, "Go now, and remember, silence is your only safety." Betty staggered to her feet, her whole world spinning. She stumbled out of the office, her body weak, her spirit broken, the curse of his words echoing louder than her own heartbeat. Betty stumbled out of the pastor's office that day, her eyes swollen with tears, her heart heavy with shame. The curse, he whispered, still rang in her ears, each word burning her spirit like fire. She walked home slowly, her steps unsteady, her clothes clinging to her damp skin. Every breath she took felt like a punishment. When she reached home, her mother noticed her red eyes. She paused, her hands still wet from washing plates, and looked at her daughter. "Betty, why are you crying?" she asked, though her voice lacked true concern. Betty hesitated, then with trembling lips whispered, "Mama, I don't want to go to Pastor Amos again. Please don't make me go back there." Her mother frowned, wiping her hands on her wrapper. "And why not? He is the one praying for your sister's success. Don't start with your stubbornness again, Betty. This is not the time." Tears spilled down Betty's cheeks as she tried to gather courage. "Mama, he touched me. He did something bad to me. Please believe me. I don't feel safe there." But instead of shock or sympathy, her mother's eyes flashed with anger. She waved her hand dismissively, her voice sharp. "What nonsense are you saying? Do you know who you are talking about? Daddy See-It-All is a man of God. He cannot do what you are accusing him of. Stop lying." "Mama, I'm not lying," Betty cried, clutching at her mother's arm. "I swear I'm not. He hurt me. Her mother pulled her arm away roughly. "Enough. What you are feeling is the Spirit working in you. Sometimes deliverance makes people cry. You should be grateful the man of God has noticed you. Do you know how many people wish he would pray for them? Don't you ever say such things again. I won't hear it." Betty froze, her mouth open in disbelief. Her last hope for protection had just been crushed. She realized her mother would never believe her, not now, not ever. Defeated, she retreated into her room, slammed the door shut, and collapsed on her bed. Her cries were muffled into her pillow, her body shaking violently. She wished she could disappear, wished she could wake up from the nightmare her life had become. From that day forward, her suffering turned into routine. Pastor Amos would send for her at odd hours, and her mother made sure she went, regardless of her protests. Each visit left her more broken than the last, her soul sinking deeper into despair. The curse he laid on her tongue and womb haunted her, chaining her silence. She stopped eating properly, stopped laughing, stopped being the bright girl she once was. On Sundays, she still sat beside her mother in the church, her face blank as the congregation erupted with joy. Pastor Amos would mount the pulpit in his flowing white agbada, his voice booming about prosperity, riches, and miracles. The crowd would leap to their feet, clapping, shouting, "Ride on, Pastor," as if heaven itself was applauding. But Betty would sit still, her fists clenched in her lap, her heart screaming for release. She wanted to stand up and shout the truth, to expose him for who he really was. But then she would hear his words in her head. "No one will believe you. Your tongue will rot. Your womb will dry." And when she looked at her mother's glowing face, filled with blind devotion, she knew he was right. After one such service, as the drums died down and the congregation began to file out, her mother turned to her with excitement. "Betty, we must go and thank the man of God for his dedication to your case. We must show gratitude. Come with me." Betty's stomach churned. Her legs felt heavy as she followed her mother unwillingly toward the pastor's office. Her body screamed at her to run, but her mother's grip on her wrist dragged her forward. Inside the office, the air felt suffocating. Pastor Amos sat as though he had been waiting. His eyes locked on Betty, and a faint smile tugged at his lips. He closed the door behind them. Her mother bowed her head and thanked him profusely before stepping aside, leaving Betty closer to him. Betty's chest tightened. She knew what was coming, and her body trembled. When he rose and began to move toward her, Betty dropped to her knees, tears spilling uncontrollably. "Please, Pastor, stop," she cried. "You're hurting me. I'm just a child. I only want to live a normal life, like other teenagers. Please, I beg you." But his face remained unmoved. He bent over her, his voice cold and steady. "I like it young and fresh. You should be proud that I have chosen you. Don't you know I am releasing blessings upon your life each time? The spirit works in ways you cannot understand." Betty shook her head violently, sobbing. "This is not a blessing. You're destroying me." He ignored her pleas. His hand gripped her chin, forcing her to look at him. "Silence," he hissed. "Do not resist the spirit." And once again, the nightmare repeated itself, her cries swallowed by the four walls of his office. But this time, something shifted. Later, Betty realized she was not the only victim. Pauline, the bright, hopeful sister who dreamed of the UK, soon found herself in the same trap. And when it happened again, it happened with Pauline. Betty walked home slowly that day, her body sore, her spirit crushed. Every step felt heavier than the last. When she reached the door of her house, she paused, staring at her mother who sat carelessly on the wooden chair, peeling groundnuts as though the world was fine. Betty's lips parted, ready to speak, ready to scream the truth she had buried in her chest for so long. But then she remembered the last time she tried. She remembered her mother's harsh words, her disbelief, and the way she shoved her pain aside in the name of spiritual deliverance. Her throat tightened, the words dying before they left her mouth. She shook her head slowly, turned away from her mother's gaze, and slipped silently into her room. There, in the darkness, she let the tears fall freely, her pillow soaked with cries no one would hear, her heart heavy with the weight of secrets no one would believe. She cried until exhaustion took her, dragging her into a restless sleep filled with nightmares of curses, shadows, and chains. The weeks that followed seemed painfully ordinary on the surface. Pastor Amos' Daddy See-It-All had travelled for a 2-week outreach in another town. The women in church buzzed with excitement, praising him for carrying the gospel of prosperity far and wide. For Betty, those 2 weeks were the only moments she could breathe without fear of being summoned. She cooked, cleaned, and tried to pretend life was normal, but the scars inside her remained raw. One afternoon, while Betty was cooking in the small kitchen, the aroma of stew filling the air, she suddenly felt dizzy. The spoon slipped from her hand and clattered to the floor. Her vision blurred, and before she could call out, her knees buckled. She collapsed, her body hitting the ground with a dull thud. Her mother rushed in at the sound. "Betty, Betty!" she cried, shaking her daughter's limp body. With frantic effort, she fanned her face and sprinkled water on her until Betty slowly stirred back to consciousness. "Thank God," her mother muttered in relief, clutching her chest. But as Betty sat up weakly, her mother's eyes narrowed in suspicion. She noticed the paleness of Betty's face, the weariness in her body. A thought struck her, a thought she quickly pushed away. No, it cannot be what I'm thinking. Still, the unease would not leave her. Hours later, when Betty was stable, her mother decided to test the nagging suspicion. She slipped into town, bought a pregnancy test, and returned home quietly. She waited until Betty had dozed off, then woke her gently. "Betty, come here," she said, her voice oddly tight. Confused and tired, Betty obeyed. Minutes later, the truth stared Mama Daniela in the face. The test strip showed positive. Her world spun. Her hands shook as she stared at the result, unable to believe it. "Pregnant," she whispered to herself. "My Betty. But how?" Rage and confusion collided in her chest. She stormed into Pauline's room, where Betty sat weakly on the bed, tears already forming in her eyes as though she knew what was coming. "Betty!" her mother shouted, holding up the strip. "What is this? What have you done? Who is responsible for this shame you have brought to this house?" Betty trembled, her lips quivering. She wanted to stay silent, but the burden was too heavy. Her voice cracked as she whispered, "It was Pastor Amos. It was Daddy See-It-All." For a moment, silence filled the room. Then her mother's face twisted in disbelief. She dropped the test strip on the floor, clutching her wrapper. "What nonsense are you saying? Do you know what you're accusing the man of God of? Pastor Amos? Never. You are lying, Betty." Tears poured down Betty's face as she shook her head violently. "Mama, I'm not lying. I've been trying to tell you all this while. But you wouldn't listen. You shoved me off. You said I was stubborn. You said he was delivering me. But Mama, he has been hurting me. He forced me, over and over again, and you kept sending me back to him." Her mother's face went pale. She staggered back, her hands trembling. "Stop, don't say such things. Do you want to bring curses on this family? Daddy See-It-All is a servant of God. He cannot. Her voice broke as she struggled to hold on to her belief. But Betty's voice rose, stronger this time, fueled by months of bottled pain. "He is no servant of God, Mama. He is a monster. He cursed me to silence. And you, my own mother, you helped him. You trusted him more than you trusted your own child. You chose your pastor over me." The words struck like thunder. Mama Daniela froze, her hands dropping helplessly to her sides. Her mind spun in chaos between the loyalty she had for her pastor and the piercing truth in her daughter's eyes. Betty's sobs filled the room. "You are not fit to be a mother," she cried bitterly. "A mother protects her child. A mother believes her child. But you sacrificed me on the altar of your blind faith. You handed me over to the wolf." The house fell into silence, heavy and suffocating. Mama's chest rose and fell rapidly. She stared at her daughter, torn between the unshakable devotion she had always had for her pastor and the undeniable pain etched on Betty's face. Her lips parted, but no words came out. For the first time, doubt crawled into her heart. The image of the flawless, holy man she worshipped trembled under the weight of her daughter's tears. She stood frozen, her body stiff, her mind torn apart, caught between believing her own blood or holding on to the man she had called the voice of God. And in that moment, everything around them seemed to shatter. What would happen next, too? Find, like, and subscribe for part 2.